Jason, for the intro, what exactly is our topic for today? I know we're talking about Blazing Saddles, but just the impact it still has today, or what?
Yeah, we could just talk about, does it still hold up? Would this movie, would people even let a movie like this be made today? That type of
Gotcha.
stuff. So, but yeah, I got everything up and running. I'm going to play the acoustic theme here and we'll get going. So, are you fellas ready?
I have to sneeze.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Are you?
All right, we're good.
All right, here we go in three, two, one.
Just drop that ass, bitch. It's open micers in the house. Pop that pussy with that open micers logo in your mouth. Jason with his bald ass head. Jacob looking in bed. It's open micers, bitch. Heard what I said. Drop that ass. Open micers in the house. Drop that ass, pop that pussy. Open micers in the house. Open micers in the house. Open micers is a mouse. Drop that ass, pop that pussy. Open micers in the house. The mic is now open.
Of course, the mic is now open. My name is Jason Robbins. One of these days, I'm going to get around to making another theme song, but for now, we're just going to use those. My name is Jason Robbins, and
And I'm Jacob Craig, and no, he's not. He's never going to get around to making another theme song. He's lying to you all actively today. He's never going to do that.
And we have joining us today, he's a returning guest. He comes to us from the Wait, You Haven't Seen podcast, which me and Jacob were on a couple of months ago talking about, what was that? Racerhead, that haunting movie that we watched. And I was on there a few weeks ago talking about Roadhouse. He is Mr. TVsTravis. Welcome to the show again, sir.
Well, thanks for having me back. I guess I made enough of an impression, right?
Yeah. And you'll be in the running for this year's rotisserie chicken for guest of the year. So this officially puts you in the running for it.
All right.
But we're going to do something a little different. And if you don't know much about Mr. TVsTravis, I implore you to go check out his podcast, Wait, You Haven't Seen, and Gore, and Those Were the Days podcast. Go check those out. But since he does a movie podcast where the premise... tell everybody about the premise of Wait, You Haven't Seen.
I mean, it's real simple. I love to talk about movies. So what I do is I find a guest who hasn't seen a specific movie or let them bring me their favorite movie that I haven't seen before. And we watch it and then we talk about it. And it's really just about exploring, either taking stuff off your list of shame or branching out, getting out of your comfort zone, watching something that you just happen to miss or you've never heard of before. It's a lot of fun to check out a movie and to discuss with somebody that experience of the first time watching a movie, because you can never get that back.
Yeah, I have to say, I've been a guest on a lot of podcasts, and when me and Jason went on your podcast, it was probably the most fun I've ever had as a guest, as opposed to being a podcast host, because you know, we had this project that we had to kind of do together, and watching Eraserhead, we got to make fun of it together, and then we got to bring all of that to your podcast on that episode. So it's definitely a lot of fun in any way that you put it, as a listener or as a guest.
Well, thank you. That's what I go for with it. I mean, talking about movies should be fun, and whether you like the movie, you don't like the movie, the conversation can still be really good, and you can still have a lot of fun with that. So, I do enjoy all of that, and it's been great having you guys on. You're going to be on again sometime soon.
Awesome.
Please. I
Well,
wanted to come on Jason's Roadhouse episode to shame him for never seeing Roadhouse. Dude, what is wrong with you?
it just seemed like a hillbilly love story with some fighting in it, and I had no desire to ever see that movie.
Okay, Jason,
Which,
I'm
I mean,
the product of a
that's not
hillbilly
wrong,
love story.
though.
What'd you say, Jacob?
I said I'm the product of a hillbilly love story.
And exactly. So I didn't want
Are
to
you
watch
trying
it.
to sell him on it, or are you trying to deter him from seeing it? Like,
I'm not sure.
Where are we going here?
I'm not sure. It could be either one.
We were talking about it in the Open Micers producer group chat that we got to talking about. We were talking about that episode with Roadhouse and how I'd never seen it. And somehow I got on the subject of Over the Top. And we're like, you've never seen Over the Top? And I was like, no, because it seemed like a hillbilly love story with arm wrestling in it. And they're like, well, no love story, but it does have a whiny kid. And I'm like, well, that just makes it even worse. Now I'm never, ever going to see it.
I remember seeing that movie when I was a kid. I don't even know how. Like, my dad must have rented it. I don't know. And I was like, why is this movie about truck driving and arm wrestling? All right, sure. And he gets like superpowers when he turns his hat backwards.
Yeah, I know the little things about it because I've listened to podcasts talking about that movie, and it seems so ridiculous and dumb. Like, how did that movie get made? Like, if I was a movie exec, even if it was Sylvester Stallone, I would have told him to get the fuck out of my office. Go write something better.
I mean, it was the 80s. There was a lot of cocaine happening, and I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But
movie producers like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do something a little bit different with this episode because we have all seen this movie. This is not a movie where one of us hasn't seen it. We've all seen this movie. I think this is probably one of the top 10 best movies ever made. Like, this is absolutely one of my favorite movies ever made. And today we're going to be talking about the 1974 Mel Brooks classic, Blazing Saddles. And we're just going to talk about whether or not does it still hold up? Would this movie work today? So I'm just going to play one little clip before we go into it here because this is absolutely one of my favorite lines. This is what you get with this movie if you've never seen it.
Hey, boys, look what I got here. Hey, where are the white women at?
I am keeping that on the soundboard for all of time.
Please. The next time we have on a black guest, play that.
Yeah. So, Travis, do you have any memories of seeing this for the first time?
I love Mel Brooks movies. This isn't my favorite one. I would say my favorite Mel Brooks movie is Spaceballs.
Mine
because
too.
I have a very personal connection to that one. That was the first movie I remember ever seeing in a theater. Was a Mel Brooks movie, was Spaceballs. But I do remember seeing this when I was real young, and like any good comedy as a kid, all the jokes went over my head. 90% of them. Didn't get it all, but it was silly. It was kind of slapsticky. The stuff with Mongo made me laugh because he was just a big dummy. But yeah, I remember seeing it as a kid. It wasn't one that I saw a lot when I was real young, but probably once I started getting into my middle teens, I'd watch it every so often. It ranked up there in my probably top 3 Mel Brooks. I put it, for me personally, behind Spaceballs and Young Frankenstein.
That's about where I would put it too. Because I love Young Frankenstein. That was a movie that I have so many good memories of Young Frankenstein because that was something me and my dad would watch together, was Young Frankenstein.
And I think part of it too is just I'm more into sci-fi and horror than I am westerns, although I love westerns. And I've grown to appreciate them more over time. They're still kind of the third tier for me, of those 3. So that's part of it too. But I love Gene Wilder, and we'll watch anything he was in. So, yeah, it was just one of those. I saw it, and once I got to, 14, 15, and I really started to understand the jokes, it got just better. Like it just got funnier because of the ridiculous nature of all of the jokes.
Yeah.
And then as I've aged, I've appreciated it for varying different reasons. So yeah, it's great. Blazing Saddles is just too funny.
I will say the one thing that breaks this movie for me, and the reason it's not my absolute favorite Mel Brooks film, I think the end of this movie, when they, break the fourth wall and all that kind of stuff happens, that's where it falls apart for me.
Yeah, it has a very Monty Python's Flying Circus type of end, which is, and endings are difficult. I mean, if you've ever written anything, or if you've done sketch comedy, ending a sketch is hard.
Oh yeah,
that's why Monty Python would do and now for something completely different. They would just stop. When I was doing sketch comedy, we would do that quite a bit, where we would just have a weird non sequitur and move on to the next thing because we couldn't figure out how to end the sketch. So this is just that on the bigger scale. So I get that. The fourth wall breaks are great because they start right away. Like, Hedley Lamar is talking to the audience. There's a lot of those. Mel Brooks was great at fourth wall breaks. He did. I mean, probably my favorite one ever is again Spaceballs, but it's the when they're looking at the video and they're at now.
Yeah.
We're at now.
What happened to then? We missed it.
We passed
when?
it.
Just now.
But yeah, it is a little silly to go like, because just out of nowhere you're taken out of the Western setting and you're on the back lot at Warner Brothers and you go onto the set of the musical. Like all that is really silly, but it's so absurd that I don't really care. Like it's just so ridiculous. The food fight in the commissary just cracks me up.
Yeah.
Because it's just so, like, my favorite part of that is Hedley, walking out, kind of seeing it like, oh boy, backs up. And you think, okay, that's it. But then the joke keeps going because it comes back out covered in like frosting, like he's in disguise, which is just genius.
Speaking of Hedley Lamar, the character of Hedley Lamar, I know that Hedy Lamar actually sued because of that name being used in this movie, and Mel Brooks said to just go ahead and pay her. So she got paid a lot of money for the use of her name in this movie. And then I didn't notice until this watch through, they actually reference giving her money to use that name in the movie. I don't know if you guys caught that or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read a little bit of the history behind that after my rewatch last night, and initially Hedy Lamar was suing Mel Brooks for about $100,000 for the use of her name, and they managed to settle out of court for an undisclosed amount that was lower than 100,000. But Mel Brooks said that she was basically just suing him because she didn't understand the joke, that they said everything except for Hedy Lamar. Like they never really used her name.
Yeah.
Like the character's name is Hedley Lamar, and no one ever says, you're Hedy. They go, Hedy. He goes, Hedley Lamar. Like she didn't understand the satire behind the naming of the character.
Yeah. But what about you, Jacob? When was the first time you saw it? Because you're way younger than we are. So what was your first time watching this, like last week?
No, so this was, this is a special movie, I think, still for the younger generations because, people from your generation, you kind of grow up and this movie's young. And then, by the time you're a teenager, it's like, well, you're old enough to watch this and it didn't come out that long ago or whatever, to find this film and watch it as a teenager in the 2010s, like you have to have parents who are a fan of it. And once you come of age and watch this movie, then you kind of like quote it with your friends, and then you find people who are also in the know. It's like, oh shit, you also know Blazing Saddles, like, because there just aren't that many people these days that even know this movie exists, in the younger generations. So I think for me it was almost a coming of age. And at the time, like, you're a 12-year-old 13-year-old watching this, it's literally the funniest thing that you have ever seen in your entire life. Like there's nothing funnier than this movie when you're 12 years old.
Yeah. And when I was a kid, this was, and we talked about this, Travis, as far as when we were talking about Roadhouse, there wasn't a whole lot that my parents would censor for me, right, as far as movies, but this was definitely on that list of, you're not watching this. Like, you're not allowed to watch this movie. So the first time, because I was a huge Mel Brooks fan. Like I said, me and my dad would watch Young Frankenstein. Yeah. Of course, he had a huge thing for Terry Garr too back then. I mean, who still doesn't. But that was, one of me and my dad's favorite movies. I love Spaceballs. It's pretty much my favorite Mel Brooks movie. But when it came to this one, it was like, no, you can't watch this one. Until I got older, and the first time I saw it, I think I was probably about 16 or 17, and it was on the free HBO weekend, We would
Yep.
get those back in the
remember
80s
those.
and 90s. And man, when that was the thing, man, dude, it was such an event when the free HBO weekend happened, because it was like, oh, we're going to go to the store and get a fresh pack of VHS tapes. We're going to record a bunch of shit. And this was one of the movies I saw for the first time on HBO and absolutely fell in love with it.
And those free HBO weekends, by the way, were great because you basically, when it would happen, you weren't going anywhere. You were going to watch HBO for the weekend. And I remember one time my parents afterwards actually subscribed to HBO for a couple of months, and it lasted about 2 months. And my dad's like, well, they just play the same stuff all the time. This is dumb. And most of it we had already seen on the free weekend. So he was like, well, this is stupid.
Well, that's kind of what they did. They would do that free weekend. They would play all the best stuff on the weekend to get you to subscribe. And my dad did the same thing. I think we got HBO once for like maybe 2-3 months tops. And he was like, like your dad, they play the same stuff over and over again. So we're going to get rid of it. So we would just wait for those free weekends and just load up VHS tapes.
Yep.
And after I saw this, it's like you said, it's one of those movies where some of the jokes kind of go over your head when you're young, but the older you get, the more you appreciate it and the funnier it gets, because you really realize how ridiculous and smart this movie is, and how it makes fun of racism in a way that, a lot of people, it does go over their head and they just kind of see the surface level of it. But when you really dig down, I mean, this movie is absolutely brilliant.
Mel Brooks is so good at finding something absurd and something objectionable, turning it on its face, making fun of it, and never punching down.
Mm-hmm.
He never punches down and takes, like, there might be some low-hanging fruit type jokes, but it's never mean-spirited, and it's never punching down, and that I appreciate in all of his stuff. It's what makes it work for me. The other thing that people will say is, oh, he recycles a lot of jokes. It's fine, they're funny. They're still funny.
That's funny.
Even if you recycle. Like, I don't care that Robin Hood Men in Tights had the same joke with Prince John's mole moving around as the hump on whatever side of Igor's back. Like, I don't care. It's still funny. Yeah. That joke just kills me every single time. So,
and you know what's funny?
But
Richard Pryor is listed as a writer on this movie. The funny part about that is he didn't even write any of the like really racist stuff. He did the Mongo scene. Like, that was Richard Pryor's contribution to this film, was Mongo.
No, that's amazing. There's something about being able to take, and I understand people that will, on its surface, look at this movie and be like, ooh, man, you can't do that. And this is a movie that would be tough to make today. Mm-hmm. Maybe not for the reasons you would think, but also for the reasons that you would think. The funny part about it is, like, the most controversial thing when it came out was the scene around the campfire with the beans. Yeah. That's what got censored at the time.
Now that you mention it, let me play a little something here.
How about some more beans, Mr. Taggart?
I'd say you've had enough.
Sounds like Jacob's house on a Friday.
Oh, yeah. Except that's just all me.
But it's just
it's hilarious that that's the scene that got cut on, like, right. TV broadcasts and stuff, was them farting around a campfire.
Yeah, I mean, what was taboo in the 70s is so weird as opposed to today. Like they did not care about the liberal use of the N-word or homophobic slurs or like, oh, farting around a campfire, absolutely too far. You cannot cross that line.
Yep.
Um,
Uh, yeah.
well, I wanted to say I disagree a little bit about the fact that this would be difficult to make today because you look at, things in the grand scheme of things, it's like this is a comedy movie where racist white people use the N word. And the reason that people say, oh, this is, so inappropriate, it's so wrong, is because it's a comedy film where racist people are saying the N word. But you can make a movie like Django Unchained, where Leonardo DiCaprio is a racist white person who liberally uses the N word, and he can be nominated for an Oscar for it because it's a drama or action film.
I think my point though is like you could make it today.
Yeah.
It would happen. It would be tougher to make today than it was in 1974 because of the language and because of the backlash that would go. Because yes, DiCaprio got nominated, sure. So did Denzel Washington in Training Day and there was liberal use of it there. Now he was using it there and not a white person, but there was still a big uproar about it in 2001, and there was a big uproar about Django when it came out. There was a lot of discourse over it. So it's less that you couldn't make it today. It's just more difficult to toe that line today because we're more aware of things than we would have been. Now, it it works in this movie, and I say this as a white guy, right? So I'm wholly unqualified to really have the conversation, but I'm here, so we're gonna anyway. um, but like, it's in the context of the movie, given the time frame that it's supposed to portray, and the fact that it's the racist characters doing it, and it's made into the butt of all the jokes, you can get away with it. So it's really difficult. But again, a lot of it is because Brooks didn't punch down, and so it doesn't come off poorly, nearly as bad as you would think.
That's
Right.
the trick, is making all the people who are the racists are the most ridiculous, and they are the butt of all the jokes.
Yeah, and they're just morons, and they're completely inept in everything that they do. You make them ridiculous caricatures, and then you have a little more leeway there. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's a much more nuanced argument than we see a lot of times with the people that say, "Oh, you can't do this movie today now. This movie's not okay to watch today now." Like those I feel like those people don't understand that these are characters being played, and to be true to the character, that character is a racist piece of shit. And you look at, the person that they're calling the N-word is the hero, the smartest person in the movie, the one who gets away with everything, the one who saves the day. Like he's not being how they're saying he's being.
Yeah.
And I think that that's Mel Brooks ultimately not punching down, where, even though the characters are trying to bring him down, the director and the studio are in fact not doing that.
Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, it comes to how those characters are going to be portrayed and how it's taken. And if you understand going into it what you're getting, and the movie starts itself off and sets you up right away, so you're not blindsided by anything, and it's consistent throughout. And I think that helps too. It's how Tarantino is able to do a lot of what he does, because he doesn't do it from a mean spirited aspect, and he puts a character like is it Candy? Yeah, something Candy is DiCaprio's character in Django. Yeah. He's terrible. He's just a deplorable, ridiculous, over the top caricature, and it's meant to be the foil for our hero. So, there's a lot of different things, and there's a lot of psychology behind it all. And at the end of the day, if you're still upset by the language being used in the movie, that's valid. There's nothing to say that's not valid. But you can definitely do a lot more than you would think you can. based on intentions and kind of execution.
And I just don't know if there's a director making movies today that has the same sort of mind for satire and comedy that Mel Brooks had. Like, is there anybody that could pull off, the way he did?
I mean, I would, even though he's not doing that type of movie, I would say Jordan Peele could.
That's who I was thinking of earlier today, because I was thinking, who is the one filmmaker today doing that sort of social commentary, satire stuff? It's Jordan Peele, but he's not doing it in comedy. He's doing it in horror.
Yeah.
No, but he has done enough comedy to have those chops. He could do that. He's just not.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and is that because the comedy movie genre as we know it is, I don't want to say dead, but in a major recession right now? Because you have, the major players from yesteryear, like Todd Phillips is doing serious movies with the Joker. You've got Jim Carrey, Adam Sandler, their careers are at the tail end. They don't, make the same movies that they used to make. I mean, the absence of people and directors like Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder. I mean, does that point to something as to why we couldn't get a movie like this today?
That's definitely part of it, I'm sure. And because comedy is often kind of like horror for a long time, and still to a point, comedy is looked down on by a lot of serious film people. You can't be a comedic actor and be taken seriously. Jim Carrey wasn't taken seriously until he started doing things like Man in the Moon and whatnot. Sandler the same way, because we look at comedy as being very base level, and it can be, but comedy is some of the hardest stuff to write well. You can make epic movie or disaster movie or any of those horrendously bad movies, and they're never going to be Airplane because the Zucker brothers knew what they were doing with Airplane. It's why, like, Edgar Wright makes comedies when he was, especially those early comedies, were so smartly written that you don't see enough of that at times because everyone wants to be taken seriously. But you can do it and do it well. It's just not easy. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, me personally, I just think that comedy is sort of, like you said, they went in kind of two directions. They went in the complete absurd territory, like with the movies, that type of thing. And then you've got movies where Judd Apatow started doing things that were more dramedies, and they were really long. Like, when I think of a comedy, I want something that's 90 minutes. Like, 90 minutes is the sweet spot for a comedy movie. But then Judd Apatow started making 2.5 hour quote unquote comedy movies, and that's where I kind of see the drop off was that point.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because comedy, 90 to 100 minutes is the sweet spot for comedy, because you can only sustain that for so long before. I mean, that's why typically television series comedies are half hour. You don't get a lot of hour comedies. And if they are, it's some sort of a mishmash, like Psych, which is a procedural, but also a comedy. That they're able to dovetail those and kind of stretch it out a little bit more. But that's like the top end of what you're going to get in a series. And I think with movies, it's the same kind of thing. It's tough to, it's easy to overstay your welcome in a 2-hour movie if it's trying to be a comedy without it mixing in other elements of things. And they're, now what exactly are you making? So there's a lot to it. Like, it's not easy. And sorry, I cut you off, James.
Sorry.
No, you're all good. I was gonna say too, you have to think about the fact that we're past the era of Apatow now as well.
Yeah.
I would argue that the Judd Apatow films and that genre and time in comedy was the last great period for comedy movies, because now we see even people like Seth Rogen he's doing The Boys and things like Preacher and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like the stars that were created from that era have all also completely moved on. Jonah Hill, Michael Cera, they've all completely moved on to serious projects, or they're just not the same star level anymore. I feel like stand up comedy kind of killed the comedy movie in a way, because you look at comedy just as a subjective art form and you think about where the stars are. Well, all of the stars in comedy right now are stand up comedians: Shane Gillis, Pete Davidson, all these people who make so much money doing stand up that they really don't have to worry about a sitcom, a major deal with a studio like Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So, and even still, we see Burt Kreischer, a giant star, make The Machine and lose tons of money on it.
It also, I think, too, stand-up comedy is not the same as acting in comedy.
Right.
And you can be a great stand-up and you may not be a very good actor, or you're not going to carry a movie, which a comedy needs somebody to carry it. Robin Williams could carry a movie because he had dramatic ability. He was also incredibly funny. You could put him in either situation and it could work. Jim Carrey has that as well. Jim Carrey was able to carry, no pun intended, a movie. But some stand-ups can't. No, like George Carlin, amazing stand-up. He's not carrying a movie. He
Right.
tried that with his sitcom. It didn't last, and he never was really starring in movies. Lewis Black, one of my favorite stand-up comedians, amazing comedian, doesn't carry a movie, but he can be a small part. So there's a lot more collaboration involved. And also, I think too, comedy is very subjective, and comedy is very timely, and it has to evolve. And that's a big thing. Is sensibilities and thoughts around things are continuously evolving, and you get all the decrying of, oh, nobody's allowed to be funny anymore. No, you can be funny. It's just there's a ton of nuance to it, and whatever you do is going to upset someone. If you are doing comedy in some way, unless you're Sinbad, you're going to offend or upset somebody. And now that I think about it, Sinbad probably did, but for different reasons. Um, but like it's tough. Was it? I think it was. I want to say it was Norm Macdonald, but it might have been Dennis Miller years and years ago, like early '90s. Was like, look, I'm going to piss off half the people, no matter what I say. So I'm just going to do my comedy. Now, whether or not you think he's funny is completely different. But he knew that he was never going to. It was never going to be universal. Comedy just won't be. Somebody's always going to take offense to whatever joke you're saying.
Yeah.
And so that makes it a lot tougher too, because it's tougher to get the financing to make a comedy. Comedies don't typically make a ton of money, and if you're a studio executive, you're gun shy about it because we're going to piss people off and they're going to associate that with our studio, or they're going to protest it or whatever, and so the money people don't want to necessarily invest in it as well.
So would it be sort of high risk, low reward for a studio to say take a script from someone like Bill Burr, who it's a raunchy, dirty comedy. He wrote it this way. It's his star vehicle picture, as opposed to casting someone like that with that star power into a film that they have more control over with a script that they already own.
I mean, the studio is going to go option B, probably 9 out of 10
Right.
times.
So
They're
is
going to
that
go
why
with the
we're not
thing.
seeing movies like Blazing Saddles anymore?
I think it's a contributing factor for sure. I mean, there's a lot of things involved in why we're not seeing that same type of movie as often anymore. But that's definitely one of them, is just studios not wanting. It is higher risk, lower reward for those kinds of things. So, Mel Brooks was at the right time. He was able to kind of get going early enough in his career that he had a lot more sway and a lot more pull in the things that he was doing by the time of Blazing Saddles, and so on. And I mean, to his credit too, Hedy Lamar sues him over the use of her name in a movie, and he's just like, all right, settle it. Let's
Yeah.
pay her, because there's no point. Why fight this? It's dumb. And probably explain the joke. And she was like, okay, sure. And take some money and go. And that's the way you handle something like that, as opposed to getting all uppity and being like, oh no, it's a joke. Can't you take a joke? Like, not everybody can.
Yeah.
So
Well, another thing too, comedies are relatively inexpensive to make, and movie studios are not making smaller budget movies anymore. Like the 10 to 30 million dollar budget movies just aren't being greenlit anymore. It's a 300 million dollar movie or nothing. And that's why I think we're kind of in a horror renaissance now. Why you're seeing so many horror movies being made is they're relatively expensive to make. They always pretty much make their money back. And I don't know if the cycle, once the horror movie trend comes to an end, are we gonna start seeing smaller, maybe indie comedies come back? Like you look at Clerks, what happened in the 90s.
yeah, it could be. I mean, the other thing too with horror is horror movies you can make, and you don't have to have anybody in it. It does not require star power to make a horror film. In fact, oftentimes you're better off without stars in your horror film,
Yeah.
because your general public isn't going to pigeonhole them into something, and you can just do whatever you want with your characters. Comedies largely need star power, because if there's a comedy, and I'm not talking for like kind of just your like film buffs and your people that just love to go see movies. I'm talking general audiences. If they see something, if they get the feel that something is a comedy and they don't recognize who's in it, they're far less likely to go
Yeah, that's
than
true.
than a comedy starring somebody that they've heard of before. But horror movies, general audience would see that if they're just a horror fan. They don't care, because they're there for the genre of film, not who's in it necessarily. Comedy, you're going there for the person, because you want to connect with that first before you go, knowing that you're going to have a good time and laugh.
Yeah.
So that's I think a big part of it too. We may see a return to some of the smaller comedies. I mean, I look at stuff like even less laugh out loud, but still a comedy, is something like Sideways, right? That's a comedy. And that was a smaller movie. Those can still happen, but they're few and far between. Like, they still exist. Comedies still exist, but we're just not seeing them the same way that we did. And certainly not the absurd, crazy comedies that Mel Brooks would do. I think Edgar Wright was doing something like that, right? Like Hot Fuzz is very much influenced by things like Mel Brooks. It's less wink at the camera directly than Mel Brooks would do, but it's that same idea of satire, and it's satire of something that somebody really loves, and they take that and just make fun of it. And Mel Brooks would either take something he really loved, like science fiction, Star Wars, and then make fun of it, but also use that as a opportunity to make, social jokes as well.
And
So,
you look at a movie along these kind of same lines, but not as extreme. But you look at a movie like Trading Places, which is another one of my favorite
Yep.
comedies of all time. And it's very heavy on like race relations, but
Mhm.
also, wealth disparity. And I think it's just as relevant now as it was in
definitely.
1983. So could you do another comedy? Like, could you remake Trading Places today and have it be as big as it was in the 80s?
I think so, if you get the right people. You have to get the right people in it. I mean, part of what made Trading Places work was you had Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy were known quantities from SNL,
Yeah.
and you pull them into a movie, and you have somebody like John Landis directing it. And I think that's a part of it, is we don't have, because the entertainment landscape is so different than it was. It's hard to like you have Saturday Night Live still exists, but it's not the same thing, and it's not the cultural thing
Yeah.
that it was back then because we don't have as much appointment television. And so if you're into Saturday Night Live now, you watch it, but you're not just getting random people checking it out, and people aren't becoming huge stars from it like they were. So I think that's the hardest part, right? It kind of comes back to what Jacob was saying. It's like the people that were doing it and were known are either aging out or moving on and doing different projects, and we don't have that same name recognition to get a good comedy off the ground. And even the actors today that can do that don't always want to, um, necessarily. Like they enjoy doing comedies, but they also want to stretch and do some other stuff. I mean, John Cena, hilarious. That guy's funny as hell. But he's also working on other projects. Or oh, what's his name? Sacha Baron Cohen was doing a lot of those satires too. I don't know when was his last project? Was it?
So the Borat sequel came out in
Yeah.
2020 or 2021, I think.
Okay.
And it did exceedingly well, but it still didn't even touch the success of Borat in
Oh no.
2006.
No, that was such a phenomenon in 2006 that I never expected the sequel to get close to that. But like he's that type of person, but he's moved on and doing other projects, although he's still doing a lot of comedies as well. Or has been anyway. I don't know what he's been working on since Borat. But
Yeah.
it's just it's tougher. It's tougher now because there's so many options too. There's so many options of ways. And like you brought up, stand up. Stand up is such a distilled form of comedy that people will go to that. It's a lot easier to find stand up to watch now than it was previously. Like outside of the comedy network, in the 90s, like you had to either have HBO or buy like the tape of somebody's comedy special. And now there are tons of them. You have entire sections of Netflix and whatnot that are just stand-up comedy from, and you forget like, wow, this guy's a comedian. I didn't even realize that, or
Yeah.
names you've never heard of.
I think one of the biggest things today of why it's so hard to do anything comedic, especially movies, and even when it boils down to just Saturday Night Live, everything is so politically split and everything is politicized now. So like no matter what you do, whether you make something right leaning or left leaning, no matter what kind of jokes you're going to make, somebody is going to take it and use it for unintended purposes, or people are going to take it like, I could see a movie like this if you were to remake this movie now, or if this movie came out now, this would be like, a right-wing darling of free speech, blah blah blah, and the left would use this movie, and it would just be a mess, and everybody's so split down the middle, like you can't I'm just tired of how somehow somebody could make that whole farting scene political these days. Like, it's like it's just hard to do.
It is. It's tough. Like everything is difficult and everything is so polarizing anymore. And it doesn't matter what it is, what the intention is, it goes that way. And we've got so much media and entertainment out there, and media literacy has fallen off a cliff. And people don't understand how to read things anymore, how to take them in, how to and then they all have a voice about it. So they can all use their hot takes and yell and scream about it, and people will listen and latch on, and then the bad message or the wrong message will proliferate. I mean, think about how many people, what was the one recently with Starship Troopers?
Yeah.
People jumping all over that and getting the wrong message from it. Like, watch the movie. It's
Yeah.
pretty obvious where Verhoeven was going with that. And if you know anything about Paul Verhoeven, you know where he was going with that.
We lack critical thinking skills now. Like at least half the population lacks any kind of critical thinking skills or any kind of idea of what satire is. Like the idea of satire has just been lost amongst people.
Yeah, and
Satire and nuance.
Yeah.
Both those are two things that you just don't people don't understand.
Yeah, and to add on to that, when Blazing Saddles was being developed, there was a point where Warner Brothers had said that they wanted to just write it off as a loss and not release the picture. But Mel Brooks had talked them into screening it in Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago. And the general public loved the movie so much that they decided to release it, and it was the highest grossing film for Warner Brothers that year. I don't think that you could do that today with something so controversial because you don't need critical thinking skills. You don't. It's just, if it's funny and it ends right there. And I don't think anyone can do that today because I think that everyone thinks that they have critical thinking skills to such a degree that they can't hear a funny joke and not read into it.
Yeah, I think also too, if they tried to do this today, Warner Brothers would just shelve it and do it
Yeah.
as a tax write-off.
A hundred
Oh, yeah.
percent.
That's what they do. So it's not new. Like
They can't even make a
Warner
Looney
Brothers
Tunes
doing that
movie.
isn't new. Right.
They can't even make a Looney Tunes movie. They can't make a successful superhero movie anymore.
Dude, who
they,
here
they
on
can't
this?
even.
Who in this room right now would pay money to go see that Bugs? What was it, the Acme versus
Coyote versus Acme.
Yeah, Coyote versus
Coyote
Acme.
versus Acme.
Right here.
I mean,
I
right here,
100%
I
would.
absolutely would. Again, also John Cena. Like
Right.
mentioned him earlier, but like I watch him because he's great on screen. But him in a movie with Wile E. Coyote, like shut up and take my money.
Yeah.
And Warner Brothers like, no one wants to see that. Writes it off. They did it with the Batgirl movie or whatever. Yeah, it's Batgirl. It's stupid, but you're right. That wouldn't happen today. Like there wouldn't be a director that could convince the studio, well, just put it out in a couple, because you can't do that anymore. It's such a different media landscape too. That's the thing. Back then, 1974, you had theaters. That was it. There weren't TV stations dedicated to movies. You had 3 networks, and they played the occasional Saturday afternoon matinee, but movies didn't get run on TV all the time. There was no home video. So you went to a theater, you watched a movie, that was it. So you could get away with that. And now it would be, you're not going to do a theatrical release because you're just not getting as many people to go to theaters as you used to. So that's not the avenue to do it. So then you dump it onto streaming somewhere, and it ends up where they do that and they don't advertise it, and then nobody sees it, and they can be like, well, see, look at that. It made no money. Nobody wanted to watch it.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of ways that happens. And I hate all that stuff. I dislike the politics of, because making a movie already is hard enough, just to get it done. And then all the politics behind it from the standpoint of like, is this going to make any money? Is this going to get out? Is anybody going to see it? Like that just compounds all of those issues even more.
And we keep talking about John Cena as a comedic vehicle. Could that be the key? Because you get someone who's a huge star like John Cena, ultra popular. People love him in action. They love him as a wrestler. You take him to comedy. If they were to remake Blazing Saddles, would the key be to cast someone ultra serious like Denzel Washington or an actor of that nature and status, someone like Will Smith, maybe even, who you're not used to seeing them in comedies at least much anymore? So that adds almost a new layer to wanting to see the film, like Liam Neeson starring in the Naked Gun remake.
I mean, to an extent, maybe. Absurdist comedies like this are going to be tougher to do regardless. And so I just don't think that that's a style of movie that necessarily translates to today. Like you sort of associate this kind of movie with who? With Mel Brooks, and then with the like Airplane and those kinds of movies. And really those cheapy crap versions of whatever movie that would come out, like Scary Movie, the first Scary Movie, funny, well written, it had some good jokes in it. Second one had that, and then they started just pumping them out because they were cheap to do and they were low hanging fruit, and it got worse and worse, and it sort of tainted the idea of that type of movie to where now you see that, and it's like immediately you get turned off to the idea. Like if it's not Mel Brooks, what am I doing? Type of thing. Fair or unfair. Um, because to do it well takes talent and skill, but you don't need those two things to just pump out a low budget, gross out comedy. I
Right.
mean, look at like American Pie. The first American Pie, smart. I mean, product of its time for sure. Definitely a lot of stuff in that wouldn't fly today, but um, it worked. Sequels got worse and worse. That kind of movie didn't last as long, even though uh, it really goes back as far as what Porky's, that kind of stuff, even
Yeah.
further probably.
Revenge of the Nerds, that type of thing.
Yeah, which are all and it kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier about like comedy has to evolve too, and what types of humor and the jokes that can happen now are going to be different than what we accepted in the mid 80s or the mid 90s or the early 2000s. It's just the nature of comedy. Comedy evolves. Good comedians evolve with the comedy and can continue to be funny because they don't rely on. I mean, look at Carlin is one, but also Lewis Black. Also, trying to think of some other comedian. Brian Regan is one I've thought of before. But like comedians um, that can evolve with comedy are the ones that stay around, and the ones that can't do that become relics and don't last. And then they complain about cancel culture, which it's cancel culture is just you can't be an asshole and continue to be taken at face value. Like at some point you have to get better than that.
Well, also too, like you said, it's I think it's a lot easier for a comedian to kind of adjust and move with the sensibilities. I think comedians have a better idea of what the sensibility of comedy is within, because they're with people and they're out in front of people all the time. And then you have something like a movie where it's kind of hard to detect what people are going to find funny, because I don't think there's a lot of humor like in the world right now. Like it's a very,
Yeah.
like you go on the internet and like the sense of like the world is just very sour right now, which is why I feel like we need more comedy movies out right now. But it's just, I don't know, it's hard to detect what people are going to find funny.
Yeah, and what jokes are going to be funny today that in a year or year and a half or maybe 2 years when your movie is finally done and put out are still going to be funny, are still going to be relevant. That's the other hard part, right? Like stand-up comedy is today, it's immediate, it's right here. Yeah, you can have the stand-up specials that are going to live forever, but the stand-up comedian, Pete Davidson, going on stage every night, he's evolving as he goes. It's iterative.
Yeah.
And a movie takes, at best you're looking at a year from when you start working on it to when it comes out. That's best case scenario, and typically longer. So that's another part of it. So you're changing sensibilities and your need to evolve with it, but also like there's time and timeliness to it all. I mean, Revenge of the Nerds, hilarious movie, but let's be real. There's a lot about that's difficult, and you look at very differently today than you would have. Can I still laugh at it? I can, because I can look at it as a product of when it came out and what we accepted versus what, like, it's not right, but it was a different sensibility at the time, and I can kind of separate those two things and be able to take something at its face value.
Right.
But-
It's almost like, looking at George Washington as the founder of the country and understanding that all of the bad stuff was just kind of how the times were.
Sure. And should it have happened? No, like in a vacuum, but we're not in a vacuum. And you cannot force the past through the lens of today, but you can look at the past through the lens of today and see what's different about it. And if there's a comedy that is too far for it, like if this movie, if Blazing Saddles is something that you were to sit down and watch, it would bother you enough, don't watch it. And that's fine. That is completely valid. If the use of the language or the jokes or whatever is too much for you, there's nothing wrong with that. And were it to happen today, it would have to be done differently. Not that it couldn't happen, it would just have to be done differently. And I think that's where the nuance in the argument can come into play. It's not that you can't be funny anymore. You just have to evolve and be able to be funny in the moment.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we're getting close to the end of the episode. I do have some clips from the movie that I want to play. And the thing is, I texted you guys. I was like, man, trying to get clips from this movie is would have to do a lot of heavy editing. So I captured,
it's going on Patreon. Let it fly.
Yeah, I captured some clips that are able to be played on here, and a lot of the stuff is visual as well. So there's a lot of stuff I wanted to capture, but it turned out to be visual jokes that went along with it. So these are some of the clips. Like this is one at the beginning of the movie.
Going to run all night, going to run all day. I'll wager my money on the bobtail nag. Somebody bet on the bay. Boy?
What?
Am I wrong? Or is the world rising?
I don't know. But whatever it is, I hate it.
I want to clip that little part out. I don't know what it is, but I hate it.
That's what sells that whole moment. Is
Yeah.
that Cleavon Little is so good in this.
Brilliant.
She is
Nobody else.
just
I can't picture anybody else in this role.
Yeah. See, I don't know why he wasn't a bigger star at the time after this as well.
I really don't know. But he balances so well between just having a great charismatic presence. Like he's got a presence akin to a Denzel Washington. But then he also can go completely Looney Tunes comedy.
Yeah.
Like literal Looney Tunes comedy coming in with the Candygram. It's so good.
Candygram for Mango.
I just think he could have done a lot. He could have been the Eddie Murphy of the 70s but for some reason it's like he did this and just kind of disappeared. So I don't know what was going on with that.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Here's another clip that says, I'm going to die here.
Hell, I was born here, and I was raised here, and dadgummit, I'm gonna die here. And no sidewinding, bushwhacking, hornswoggling, crocker is gonna roll my biscuit cutter.
Genuine frontier gibberish. I love
Now,
that.
who can argue with that?
Robert. I had, he does actually say words when he talks, because I had the captions on and I was just like, holy shit, he's actually saying words.
Yeah. He says something about no one being able to take away his biscuit cutter or something like
biscuit
that.
cutter. I was like, what is a biscuit cutter? Here's
good.
another one.
And
go ahead.
the very end of that clip, David Huddleston also just
Yeah.
There's so many actors that are in this for just like a short amount of screen time, but they're so funny. David Huddleston is one, and also where is he? John Hillerman, who doesn't matter how many times I see John Hillerman in something, when he doesn't have an accent like Higgins, it throws me off.
I didn't know he wasn't British until like a year ago. Because I'm so used to him being on Magnum PI. I thought he was British my whole life. And they're like, no, he was born in like Nebraska or some shit.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And here's one that's kind of a visual. Well, I don't know if I should play this because this does have a little bit of something in it. I'll just go ahead and play it. If we get in trouble, we get in trouble. So.
Are you crazy? They'll never go for it. And then again, they might. Little red devils, they love toys. May I try one?
Please do, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. These things are defective.
Right as usual, sir.
Show off, sir.
Just sign this, sir, right here.
Okay, give us a hand here.
All right, sir.
This is when they're talking about giving the paddle balls to the Native Americans for their land.
Oh. And again, like the governor is he's an idiot. Yeah. He's a complete idiot. So of course he's going to be like exactly like that. I love that, but I love the running gag of like this thing's defective or this one's
Yeah.
warped, and no one else has a problem with it.
Here's
I also
another
like
one.
at the end of it when he's passing it out, he decides to just give them out to everybody in lieu of pay.
Yeah.
And if you're watching it, there's one guy that keeps reaching over to like get one, and he never gives him one. It's,
There's
it's
so
like the
many
guy reaching
new-
for a handshake, and you're giving everybody else a handshake, but that guy, like he's giving paddles out to everybody,
Yeah.
and this one dude's over here like, huh? Oh no,
There's
wait, maybe-
literally
no.
something new to see every time I watch this. I catch something new every time I watch it. Here's another one. I think this was at the end of that scene.
Holy underwear! Sheriff murdered, innocent women and children blown to bits. We've got to protect our phony baloney job, gentlemen. We must do something about this immediately. Immediately. Harumph, 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 harumph. I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.
Give the governor harumph.
Harumph? You watch your ass.
I mean, it doesn't get
Oh,
any
yeah.
funnier than that. I mean, that's just brilliance.
It really is good, and I think
we got to
was that-
protect our phony baloney jobs. Like, I just
Yeah.
want to send that sound clip to every politician.
was that before or after Harvey Korman says, "Gentlemen, please rest your sphincters."
I think it was after that. Like, dude, there was
It's-
so much I wanted to clip out of this movie.
Harvey Korman, my gosh, he was just
Have you ever
he
seen
was
the
so
clip
good.
from the Carol Burnett show? I think it was the dentist clip where him and who's the guy that plays Dorf on Golf?
Oh, Tim Conway.
Tim Conway. They couldn't get through the sketch because they're laughing. It's one of the best clips of all time. And just go look that up. Carol Burnett, like Harvey Korman best clips. It should be in a compilation somewhere.
Oh yeah, yep. That I've seen that. It's brilliant.
And here's one that's going to skirt the line for us, but it needs to be heard. So here we go.
Hey, the sheriff is a nick.
What are you saying? The sheriff is near.
No, gotta blame it, dang blame it. The sheriff is a nick.
Oh man, that skirts the line right there.
The
Yeah.
sheriff is near. Oh,
And of course, this is my absolute favorite line of the movie, and I'm so glad I kept it because I'm going to use this all the time now.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Man, there are so many you could do from here.
And of
Are
course,
we okay? Are
Gene
we
Wild,
dude,
Gene Wilder and his little bit about these are simple people, farmers.
oh, here we go. You guys
Morons.
want to hear some Gene Wilder? Here we go.
Yes, I want to hear
Are
from Gene
we
Wilder.
awake?
We're not sure. Are we black?
Yes, we are.
Then we're awake. But we're very puzzled.
Let's see. Here's another one with him. Let's see.
A man drink like that and he don't eat. He is going to die.
When?
Oh, just the way he delivers that. When? And of course, here's the line here, the big Gene Wilder line.
What did you expect? Welcome, Sonny. Make yourself at home. Marry my daughter. You've got to remember that these are just simple farmers. These are people of the land. The common clay of the New West. You know. Morons.
And that laugh is genuine because he didn't know that was the line. That's my favorite part about that is Gene Wilder, from what I understand, he ad-libbed that. And Cleavon Little didn't know that was what he was going to say. So that laugh is genuine.
It seems like a break of a laugh.
Yeah,
he's
it
absolutely
really made the
corpsing
movie
there.
feel real.
Oh, it's so good.
Just hearing these
So
clips
good.
makes me want to go watch it again. Just their chemistry. Gene Wilder always had great chemistry with whoever he was on screen with, whether it was Cleavon Little or Richard Pryor or what was his name? The humpback in Young Frankenstein.
Oh crap!
What's his name?
Why is my brain not pulling the name all of a sudden? I know it. I can
But
see it. I can see
Igor,
him.
basically, yeah, Igor from Young Frankenstein. Like he just has crazy chemistry with whoever's he's on the screen with, and that's hard to do. And this
Marty
is
Feldman.
Yeah, Marty Feldman. That's it. I love that guy.
All I could see were giant bug eyes.
Yeah, that crazy eye he had, like that was real. Like he had that crazy eye in real life. Here's one of my favorite Cleavon little lines.
Would you care for another Schnitzengruben?
No, thank you. 15 is my limit on Schnitzengruben.
Well, then, how about a little,
Baby, please. I am not from Havana. Excuse me, honey.
Baby, I am not from Havana. And of course, who is Mongo, you ask?
Who is this Mongo anyway?
Well, Mongo ain't exactly a who, he's more of a what.
That perfectly explains Mongo. And then, of course, this is the last clip I got. And this is, of course, towards the end of the movie. I played it at the beginning, but it's worth playing again.
Hey, boys! Look what I got here! Hey, where are the white women at?
I also like when Bart's about to go after Mongo and he's putting on the belt. He's putting on his gun belt. And Gene Wilder's just like, no, don't.
You just piss him off.
If you shoot him, you'll just make him mad.
Yeah, I think the biggest or the best physical comedy scene is when Mongo rolls into town and the guy's like, "Hey, you can't hitch that there," and he goes and knocks out his horse.
Yeah, punches the horse, which I think was the only other thing that got edited out of television showings was the campfire scene and him punching the horse.
Wild.
Which is such a great stunt too. Like that horse was so good.
If you watch it really closely, I mean, you can see the guy like yank the reins when he gets hit, and it's like, ooh, that still kind of hurts when you like poor horse.
But yeah, Mongo was great. I mean, the whole thing, the movie is just hilarious.
Yeah.
But what do you think, fellas? Is this worth? Does it hold up? Like what grade out of say 5 stars would you give this movie?
Oh, I mean, it holds up for me. I am notorious for liking everything, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask this, but like I think it holds up for me as long as you can look at it through the intentions that it was and not just focus on the language being used. So I would give it 4 out of 5. I think it's super solid, real good.
What about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I would give it 5 stars. You just don't see movies like this anymore that are so well written, so risque. Even it's genuinely one of a kind, and there's a reason we're talking about it in 2024 when it was made in 1974. 5 stars for me.
Yeah, I give it 4.5 because, like I said, the ending doesn't work for me. But as far as the jokes and the comedy aspect of it, the social commentary, the satire is all perfect. And it's a movie that still needs to be watched by people. And I know a lot of people out there would get the wrong message from it, but those are just the kind of people that can only see surface level type of things. But
yeah.
And so I think it is. And this movie was, and before I go, I just want to say this movie was deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in 2006, that's a very major thing to happen to a movie. Like that doesn't just happen to any movie. It has to be a movie of utter cultural significance and importance.
Also, Madeline Kahn was nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah, she was
Best Supporting Actress.
I should have got some
it
more
had 3
clips.
Academy Award nominations, I believe.
And we didn't even mention the great joke of how everybody in Rockridge is the last name of Johnson.
Yeah.
Which is not brought, like, it's right in front of you, but they don't make it like a in-your-face joke. where they're saying it. They just everybody's name is Johnson, and I always forget that for some reason.
Yeah.
And every time I see it, it just makes me laugh. Like, oh yeah, that's right. They would all be related because they all came like on the same wagon train and settled there.
But I absolutely implore anybody that's never seen it, go give it a watch. It's absolutely worth a watch. And Travis, thank you for coming on the show again, man. It's been an absolute pleasure having you again. And thank you for letting me and Jacob come on to your podcast as well, because it is honestly one of the most fun podcasts that I've ever done outside of, this one.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me back, because it's always fun. And thank you for that, because I want the show to be fun. And it makes me feel good to know that that comes through and you guys enjoy it. And definitely going to get you both back to be on. So,
well, tell everybody where they can follow you on the interwebs.
Pick your favorite social media platform. I'm on there as TVsTravis. I'm on Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky, Instagram, whatever. I'm more active, I would say, on things like Threads and
True Social.
Yeah, Truth
yeah,
Social.
that one. No. I should say good or better social media platforms. I don't know. They're all garbage anyway. But any of those, or go to TVsTravis.com. You can find links to all my stuff there. There's a link to my Discord server there, as well as the show, the Patreon, all the good stuff is at TVsTravis.com.
What about you, Jacob? You got anything you want to throw out there before we leave this week?
Just that if you were watching this on the 1 month buffer, please come get into our Patreon, because you can see stuff like this as soon as it happens. You don't have to wait a month, 2 months, 3 months to watch our fantastic Patreon content. You can give us $1 a month, and you can become a patron, where you have a direct link to talk to me and Jason. Tell us what kind of guests you want to see on our podcast. You can see fantastic discussions like this. You can watch me get tased. You have the entire library of our Patreon extras at your fingertips. So go get in that Patreon right now. Patreon.com/OM podcast.
I am going to make an exception for this particular episode. I'm going to put this up a few days after. I'm going to give the patrons about 3 or 4 days with it before I put it out. Normally, our Patreon specials are held behind the paywall for quite a while, but this one is going to go out pretty quick. But just know that these extra episodes every month are funded by the Patreon. So if you want us to keep doing these extra episodes, and you want us to do the challenge videos, like last month we ate Vegemite. If you want us to keep doing stuff like that, go to our Patreon, patreon.com/OM podcast. And as little as $1 a month will keep us doing these extra videos every month, extra episodes. So head on over there. What are you doing? It's just $1. If you ain't got $1, what are you doing with your life? And that being said, if
hosting
you want
a podcast.
Yeah. If you want to email us at OpenMicersPodcast@gmail.com. Linktree/OpenMicersPodcast takes you everywhere you need to go. All the socials, everywhere. The YouTube, all the stuff we've got. And of course, BRez.com, and use the code OMPodcast for 10% off your order. So thank you for joining us, and thank you, patrons. We love you all, and we will see you all next week.
Is it true what they say about your people?
It's true. It's true. All right. Well, thank you all for watching on YouTube. We will see you guys next month.